Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Welcome back, everybody, to The Wilder Ride, Getting Wilder by the Minute, a podcast where we break down and celebrate the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time, and we are currently in the midst of Season 1, dedicated to looking at the film Young Frankenstein. I'm Alan Sanders, I'm your host.
And I'm Walt Murray, your co-host.
And joining us once again, who's been with us through this entire blind man scene, we've got Doug Greenberg of the Rocky Minute. Doug, thanks so much for being here. Yeoman's work, not just late last week, but all through the weekend into today.
I wish I could say it's been a grind, but this has been a pleasure. It's easy. I could do this all day long.
Well,
all week long.
I'm glad you were able to, because we've needed you for 5 days across a weekend, and we appreciate you being able to close it out with us. Let's go ahead and remind everybody where we were yesterday. A very angry and exiting creature. And when we end this minute, we are going to be hearing a violin, and it nearly ends with the shout of, nah! Nah! Na. Is it somebody from that old television show, Sha-na-na? I mean, what is the na?
Let's hope it's not Sha-na-na.
No. Bowser's out there.
Good night, everybody, and grease for peace. Well, see, if you're wondering why I'm saying goodnight here at the beginning of the show, it's because our research indicates that a lot of yous don't stick around long enough to see the end of the show. And that includes several guys in Sha-na-na. Anyways, for those of you who don't plan to stick around for the end of the show, the joke's on you, because you already did. Gotcha. And now, on with the show!
I just gave my age. All right, so let's continue what's going on in this scene. And we start with the door finishing its absolute destruction. It is splintering, and it falls apart. And I think I got to give it to Peter Boyle. He does a good enough job realizing the job of my job is I have to completely clear the doorway, because he knows as an actor that we've got this joke coming up. We've got the blind man Harold who's going to come up behind him. He can't leave remnants of the door. He can't. And so he kind of takes a minute to make sure all the pieces are at least out of the doorway, and including even one giant piece is kind of like wedged up against the side in the shrubbery. But he makes sure that while he's doing all of his, motions and machinations, that he makes sure everything's away, and then he heads off screen.
Well, that had to be a challenge for him, as big as he is, and with the extra 125 pounds of stuffing and costume that he's got on. I'm sure getting through that door was a feat.
And what's cool is, and Doug, I don't know if you caught this, but when he's trying to shove that board that ends up kind of brushed up against the branches of the tree, he looks at his thumb one more time.
I noticed that too. Just to make sure it wasn't on fire, I guess.
My very first note of this is like he holds his thumb up, and in the middle of his rage, he looks at his thumb and he's like, I can't believe this shit. That's like the expression when he looks at his thumb.
He does. He's almost like, God, that hurts.
Oh, I love it.
And his face, if you were to freeze frame right at 2 seconds, he is in anguish still.
Awesome.
He just looks like he's an absolute combination of rage and pain and anguish. Yeah. It's all at once.
Well, and he really, his facial expressions are just awesome. And again, he's not uttered one English word through this movie so far, but he has communicated a lot to us.
Now, as he does leave the screen, we get a sense, we see Harold coming in trying to figure out where's he going. Harold is dressed all the way down to the sandal look for this sort of pseudo monk that we've got living in the woods.
Yeah, and you can see a little bit more of his costume here, that it is, I don't know what you call that, if it is a religious...
It looks like a monk's robe.
Yeah, it does.
No hood, at least I can't see a hood, but it's certainly Just a robe that goes all the way down to his ankles. He is wearing sandals on his feet. He's got that crooked walking stick to try to help him
and
as he makes his way.
Belted at the waist.
Mm-hmm. And it's got long tassels swinging on the left side of him there.
Yeah, still got the cigar. And for a blind guy with a beard like that, he's pretty brave to smoke a cigar. Lucky he doesn't light that beard on fire.
Well, he's probably gotten used to it by this point. Maybe he's been blind for a long time.
Well, and hopefully he's not using any beard oil.
Beard oil?
That's true. That would set his face on fire.
Yeah, that could be bad.
I mentioned this yesterday. I said that if you look at some of the did you know, some of the, behind the scenes facts, just, the making of, there's this piece of information. And Walt, you and I both bought into this piece of information. What have we always been told? It was on the internet, so it's got to be true. What have we always been told about this line? Wait, I was going to make espresso.
I had been told, and I had read in multiple places that was an ad-libbed line.
What about you, Doug?
I read the same thing. So, like you said, it was on the internet, so I believed it.
So you believed it. Well, guess what I have here? In the script that we continuously go back to confirm what was in the movie initially, what did Gene and Mel write, what did they maybe shoot and leave out, what did they maybe ad-lib, so we can kind of track that. Let me read you from the script that we have been going back and forth from this entire time on the Wilder Ride. The monster yells out, ow, that it almost sounds like wow, runs through the door, the blind man, wait! Where are you going? Wait! I was going to make espresso. In the script.
Well, that urban Transylvania legend is debunked.
From what I can see, this is the script we're working from. This is the third revision that was blessed by 20th Century Fox. This was the shooting. The shooting script was cut from this version of the movie script. This is the one that they've shot and has been pretty much accurate everywhere through this, and it's exactly word for word written right there.
They've gone so far to say, though, even after the quote unquote ad-lib line, they did the fade to black at the end of that because the crew erupted into a fit of laughter. Right. So they had to cut that out with the fade to black.
What I think may be true is the way he delivered it was so funny that maybe they did laugh, because here's what also is in the script. That as soon as he says, but I was going to make espresso, he puts the cigar back into his mouth, turns around, we follow him back inside, goes over to the phonograph that you wanted to give a shout out to Edison back earlier in the week, or last week.
Our statesman.
Puts the Ave Maria sad-sounding soundtrack back on, gets back on his knees, and then begins to pray, "A visitor is all I ask, a temporary companion, just to help me pass a few short hours of my lonely life." Which is exactly where we began. I feel like the Pink Floyd The Wall album, where if you're listening very closely at the very end, it says, so this is where, and then if you listen to the very, very beginning, when you listen to the very start, it says, we began. And so if you loop the Pink Floyd The Wall album, it's supposed to end with, so this is where, and it starts with, we began. So now it's a nice circle.
Or we can shout out to our Minute by Minute brethren at Groundhog Day.
We could do that.
That's
if we
right.
do it all over again.
Do it all over again.
Sean German and Dave Pallas doing their Groundhog Minute.
But this is, again, I think I mentioned it a couple of days ago about how many guests have he spilled soup into their lap.
Well,
how many thumbs has he lit on fire?
It's interesting. Had they left this, Walt, what would have been the impression had they showed him going back inside and kind of resetting for the next guest?
Well, not that I ever tend to overthink anything, but
well, that's true.
I think I would have kind of gotten a little in my head about what was going on there, and it would have almost added a little bit of a, I guess, kind of a weird sidelight to this.
I almost think it's like what Doug's saying, that you would have gone like, oh, what's he gonna? Does he do this every night? Is this a nightly occurrence?
That would have really kind of gotten in my head where it's important to move to the next scene. But I think that would have gotten that loop would have gotten in my head a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree. It would make you think more than you really should at the end of this.
Yeah, I have to agree with you.
So here we have immediately following, and okay, I'm going to remember this comment you made about getting right back into the story, that it makes sense to just kind of go right back, because the next shot that we have in the film is of a lumbering shadow against the wall in the streets of Transylvania. We hear the sound of a violin, and he's being drawn to the violin. But before we get there, had we followed the original script right after watching Harold get back on his knees and recite the exact same prayer, according to the script, dissolve to exterior, a street, night. A half-pint highwayman, Jack Sprat, is preparing to mug the next stranger. Jack Sprat says, "Here I stand, Jack Sprat, highwayman extraordinaire, ready for a night of evil deeds and wicked purpose. Ah, here comes another unsuspecting victim." He steps out and jabs his pistol into the solid hulk. "Your money or your life." Now, this is him, of course. He's plugging it into the back of the monster. The monster at that point seems like 20 feet above him as the camera pans up. Jack Sprat can make a deal with any man. Monster goes, He goes, "I see you're one of us. What do you want? My money?" He slips out his money with a big bag, hands it to the monster. That monster, more angry. All right, I see your point. Let's make it my life." The monster whacks him out of the way and walks off. Jack Sprat on the ground. "I've got to get glasses. I've got to see these people." End of scene. Now, had we left a dumb Cockney sort of Jack Sprat character trying to rob somebody, and it turns out he's trying to rob the monster, and it turns out he freaks out and decides to hand over all of his loot to the monster. Walt, I'll ask you first. Would that have worked?
No. Next question.
We're done.
No, that is a really weird scene for a number of reasons. Number one, we're not in England.
Well, everybody has an English accent.
Everybody does.
Weird German.
Yeah, right.
Except for Cloris Leachman's. She's got a weird kind of half
she's
German, half Romanian. I don't know what it is. She made it up.
A Leachman.
It's a Leachman accent. It's a Bluka accent.
It's a Bluka. That whole Jack Sprat scene to me does not work. I'm glad they dropped it. I don't even know. Did they shoot that one? I haven't seen that one in any
I don't believe they
outtakes.
shot this at all. They may have cut. Well, you know what? We'll have to go look for it, because it seems like it's one of those self-contained scenes that they may have and just decided to say, you know what? The whole thing we need to cut. Remember your line, or what you said. I think they needed to get back to the action. They just saw the monster storm off, to have the slowdown of Harold going back into prayer, to then have this little scene to be kind of a silly little scene of this guy holding the monster up, and then the reason he doesn't know. We just had a blind man scene. Now we've got a nearsighted highwayman trying to hold up this lumbering hulk. It just feels out of place.
Well, and I don't know what it tells us about the monster or the story that they would have that in there. It isn't even really that funny. So I don't know what that would have even contributed to the movie. Doug, what do you think?
Well, I mean, bravo on your Cockney accent, Alan.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, well done. Well done, sir.
But I agree that, like, you reading that, like, it just felt disjointed and just completely out of place. I didn't find it funny at all. I think it would have been an awful inclusion.
I get a sense that this is another Mel Brooks scene. Like, this feels like it would fit in Dead and Loving It. It didn't feel like it fits in this movie.
Yeah, it could be.
Who's going to rob a 7-foot gorilla?
Right, because even if you're nearsighted, really, are you going to not realize what you've just done? I mean, come on.
Yeah, disjointed.
Yeah, and this does kind of fall into the thing that we talk about when we're doing security assessments with people is you can't 100% keep burglars out of your house or whatever, but you want to build the wall high enough that they go next door. You know, your house has the alarm system. Your house has, cameras in front of it. So they're going to go to the house that doesn't. Well, this is kind of the same type of thing. Nobody's going to rob this lumbering giant monster.
Right.
And even if, which it's dumb that, let me ask this. You got your
Doug, you've got a law enforcement background. Walt, you grew up in a law enforcement family. You're a private investigator. Do most, kind of snatch and grab, or you're gonna mug somebody just for their wallet? Do you just jump up blindly from around a corner without knowing who is coming?
No, you work your mark.
Prey on an easy target.
So it doesn't even make logical sense that you would be sitting there going, oh, wait, it's in the dead of night. There's no one else around. And now I hear some lumbering. And don't tell me you can't tell it's a lumbering person hulking his way up the street. But he's going I'm going to just wait till the last second, jump out and put my pistol up and say, hand over your wallet.
Yeah, no. In all sense of this, it doesn't make any sense.
No.
Like I said, you go for the easy target. And this by no means of the word is an easy target.
No.
He may be a simple target, but he's certainly not easy.
Right. Right.
And I think from the flow of the movie, I really am kind of at a loss as to how this would fit in any way, shape, or form.
Keep in mind, time-wise, it feels weird when we're doing this 1 minute at a time, but even just watching the movie real time, it's been 7 minutes since he last left the castle. The last time we saw Gene Wilder, Terry Garr, Marty Feldman, we haven't seen the main cast members for 7 minutes as we watch the scene with the little girl for 2 minutes, and then this entire blind man scene for basically 4.5, almost 5 minutes now. So it's 7+ minutes almost that we haven't even been with our main characters.
And the monster has been carrying the movie, and he's not even the central focus, presumably, of the story. So I'm glad they didn't include this. That would have been a very awkward scene.
If you go by the typical format of how film scripts are written, they're written in a certain way because it helps you predict how long each page would take. Each page is usually about a minute of the movie.
Right.
This would have added another 2.5 to 3 minutes of the movie had we kept all of this in, from adding the Harold going back to prayer, putting the record back on, getting down on his knees, then fading to black, then showing the monstering Hulk lumbering, and then having the guy talking to himself, the Jack Sprat talking to himself, then holding him up, the back and forth gags. That would have made it almost 9 to 10 minutes since we last left, and you just can't do that in a movie. Not like this. Not when you're trying to compress it anyway and keep the audience into the story you're telling. It's too much of a distraction.
And you also want to advance the plot, too, which that absolutely does not.
It does not at all. I think as good as the editors were on this movie, if this scene had been shot, they'd have dumped it.
Right. Had they, because we don't know. Maybe it had and they dumped it, but had they... I think they just looked at it and goes, forget it. This doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't work.
Because the very next scene, which is what we do have in the film, is after the fade to black at "I was going to make espresso," is we see the shadow of the Hulk, the hulking beast, making his way down the streets of Transylvania, where last we were at, Walt, they were bringing the cart with the coffin on it through these cobblestone streets when Igor and Dr. Frankenstein had stolen the body that is now Peter Boyle reanimated. We get the sound of the Transylvanian lullaby again, played on the violin.
Mm-hmm.
This silhouette kind of looks like Igor's drawing of the Frankenstein monster from earlier, doesn't it?
It does. And, and this is kind of a weird thing for me. Right before we started this episode, I was looking at a couple of videos. I know that scene from somewhere. And someone who knows horror movies better than me is going to jump on our Facebook page and tell me where this came from.
I don't know. I'm thinking maybe Frankenstein.
Maybe, but I couldn't find it in the Frankenstein movie. Oh. But this is, I believe that silhouette is a jerk.
that was great. You want to talk about comedic timing?
That was perfect. He just pulled a Walt on me.
I did. I pulled a Walt.
But that scene is an homage to one of the other horror movies, and I can't pull out of the vast wasteland of my brain which movie that is from.
Look how big my brain is. We're back to that again.
Tumbleweeds blowing through.
Well, it is okay. So the composition of the shot is fantastic. This is your typical horror monster movie shot where you're lighting so low to the ground and the creature is walking so close to your lighting source that it literally is as tall as the second story peaks of the street line buildings. And he's moving at that lumbering, arms outstretched, kind of just meandering his way up the street before we actually cut to a different angle and he's climbing the hill. I find this interesting. He's heading toward a lit lantern at night. And I don't know if he would have freaked out or not because the music starts just in time that maybe it's putting him in a trance. And maybe that's why it's in this shot. But it bothered me for a moment. Why is he not shying away or acknowledging this flame inside this lantern at night? Because he actually turns, and thanks to the light there, we get a really good look at his face. He's not bothered at all by the light. So we get the sense right away, either it's one of two things. Either the editors or the filmmakers just accept the fact that this isn't bothering him, or it shows you how powerful this Transylvanian violin of the lullaby is to being able to capture the creature's imagination.
Yeah, and there may also be a sense, too, of he's now had a little bit of experience with fire, and even though he got lit on fire, he kind of realizes that it's not as big a threat as he thought before. I don't know.
You know, a lot of this movie reminds me also of a play with the sets. You know, everything feels small, all the sets. And this is another instance where him walking up to that lantern lights up his face, and it's you really get like a feel that he's made up. Like there's a lot of makeup on his face.
Yeah, you do.
A lot of the cosmetics that make him the monster. I mean, it doesn't take me out of the story at all. It has more of a small like a play kind of feel.
Yeah, and with the cheeks darkened, it does give much more of a sullen look to him.
Yeah, but I get what he's saying. This is the first time you really notice it's got more of a monster makeup look rather than just being gaunt or shadowed.
Yeah.
And I'm glad they don't hold it for too long for that reason.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind it. It doesn't bother me. Just something that I noticed.
One thing I do love about the end of this scene is Gene Wilder's hillbilly hat. That is a great piece of costuming.
Well, you know, what I was thinking while you're looking at that is I'm suddenly thinking, when did we get into the Frisco Kid?
Right. He looks like the Frisco Kid. He's got the big fake beard on. He looks
just
very
like his
Jewish.
character in the Frisco Kid.
He sure does.
The bushy beard and just all in there. And I almost, because this is a fake beard, but it's so similar to the Frisco Kid. It's hard to not see that character now, knowing that Gene Wilder plays in that movie. Now, of course, that doesn't come out till 1979, so no audience that saw it at that time, and unfortunately a lot of people never saw the Frisco Kid, so it would never throw them. But for us, we're like, wait a minute, it looks like Ephraim from the Frisco Kid.
Well, it is interesting going through this movie how many characters or themes that they had in this movie play out in other movies. In the last minute, we had a mute and a blind man, and later on we have see no evil, hear no evil.
Absolutely.
Oh.
We have the Frisco Kid show up here. So there are these recurring themes. I was kind of wondering in that last minute if Gene Wilder didn't go, you know what, there's a whole lot more to be done with this sort of dynamic.
Maybe, or it's just ironic we go back. I mean, because there is something funny that they create the situation of the blind man and the mute trying to have to work together. In this case, obviously, it's not a mute, it's a deaf man and a blind man.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, just to pair that comic duo of where the misunderstandings are so easy to explain why they keep happening.
That's
because
right.
one's blind, one's deaf. In this case, one can't speak, so the other one just interprets what he's saying incorrectly.
Mm-hmm.
And he can't see who he's talking to.
Right.
Who knows where their inspiration came from? It may very well have been this.
So we very much sense now, as we're moving towards the end of this minute, that the creature is in fact easily drawn to music. We saw it earlier, and obviously this explains how Dr. Frankenstein in disguise... Let me ask a question here, because it is Dr. Frankenstein. He's in disguise. He's trying to figure out how to lure the monster back. He recognized, when Frau Blucher played it, it had a hypnotic effect. Maybe if beyond being hypnotic, maybe it'll actually attract him. He's taking a chance here. Why does he have to be in disguise?
That was my question.
I don't know. That's a great question.
With the hat and the beard and everything.
Well, and there may be a sense in which he doesn't want the townsfolk to know who he is, too. And this may be, he's got to already start playing it a little bit more low-key with them. But, his last experience with the monster was pretty hacked off at him. He got blown up on the electrical stuff. So,
see, I'm wondering if maybe that was it. Is he worried that just in case the recognition of who's playing the violin would override the hypnotic effect of the music, that he wasn't going to take any chances? I'd rather look like a total stranger than to be the last memory of him getting all ticked off after he went up against the capacitor and lit himself on fire and went storming out of the castle.
I wonder if it's one of those things that doesn't matter who's playing the music, as long as the music's being played, he's drawn to it. So Dr. Frankenstein wouldn't have to be made up and dressed up. Who knows?
There's really some science here that does not get explained.
Something else here, and I know this is like totally out of, like, it's an anachronistic order, but did you ever see the movie V for Vendetta?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I keep thinking of that scene that they have where V meets him in the park to talk to the inspector toward the end of the movie, and he's wearing that pull-down hat, very similar. He's got the fake beard, but he's wearing glasses, and it's that same kind of feel to me. Every time I see Gene Wilder for a second, I'm almost transported to V for Vendetta as well, when he's telling the whole story about, let me tell you about your government.
The whole cloak and dagger.
Yeah, when they're sitting around the original statue of the Ring Around the Rosies, when the disease started to break out and they realized that it was actually a disease that the government created to then cure so that way they could look like the heroes and put a fascist government in place. I love that scene. It's with Rookwood, or Rookwood is, I think, he says that his name is Rookwood, and it's actually V in disguise telling him the rest of the pieces he needs to know the one thing he didn't want to know. In this case, we've got the creatures being drawn to Gene Wilder and trying to get him off the streets to try to save the streets of Transylvania. It's an interesting parallel to me because the beards are so similar. The hat is, drawn down. To me, it just reminds me of that.
I can't comment. I saw that movie once a long time ago, and
that's how you feel about it.
Exactly.
I may dump that whole town. All right. Well, at the very end, it's obvious now, Walt, when you see the body language of the violinist, the Dr. Frankenstein. And if you didn't, I think it's pretty obvious. We know it's Dr. Frankenstein. I don't know why we, the audience, wouldn't know. But it's obvious he's luring him somewhere, because at the very last second of this minute, he starts to go, "Nah!" And we don't know what he's yelling, but he starts to yell something.
Starts to yell something, and we're going to have to come back next week to find out what.
So maybe he just got his thumb lit on fire.
Maybe he got his... So, and unfortunately, that is where we end this minute, but we still have 3 more minutes this week to go. Unfortunately, this is our last time to have Doug with us. So, Doug, it's been great having you as part of the podcast late last week and all into the beginning of this week.
Yeah, I really can't thank you guys enough for inviting me on. I had a blast. I love talking about this movie, and really, I mean, you guys are doing this movie such great justice by analyzing it the way you are, with such dignity and respect that it deserves. So, congratulations.
Well, let me ask, before we wrap things up, put a little bow on this and send it off to the Podcast Hall of Fame, do you have anything else that we missed, any last-minute notes that you want to make sure that we cover?
No, I didn't. I came in not knowing any below the surface level stuff anyway. I just knew what was on screen, and I knew that it cracked me the F up. So I didn't need to know more than that, but you guys have opened a whole new world, surrounding this movie and everything. So I had a great time just researching my 5 minutes, and I'm hanging on every minute that you guys have done so far.
Awesome. Walt, what about you?
I would love to find a good hillbilly hat like that. I'm now stuck on the hillbilly hat. But I think that this is one of the great scenes of this movie. I still kind of debate back and forth in my mind of how far it moved the ball down the field plot-wise. I think it's an important scene for a lot of reasons. And it is interesting that this is one of the iconic impressions that people leave this movie with is him with his thumb on fire. And again, I mean, we see an immensely talented actor in Gene Hackman join the cast of this movie. And to him, the movie was important enough and good enough that he was willing to do it uncredited. I think that says a lot about him as an actor and as a person, and I think it says a lot about this movie and really the importance of the movie. And the more we work with this film, the more important I think this movie is. And I really hope that people will start to appreciate it for what it is, because
if they don't already.
I think that when you look back at film history, this is one that more and more to me is standing out as just a really weighty, heavy important movie.
It's amazing how much you can jam pack into what's now considered a comedy, and yet still have so much that even here we are nearly 44 years after it was initially released, we're still finding threads and things that are fascinating to discuss.
And way ahead of their time. And I don't even think there's a word to categorize this movie because it is so many different things.
Doug, before we let you go, since we kind of talked early on about just your thoughts on Young Frankenstein and your love of it, anything, since you don't get to be with us through the rest of the ride, final closing thoughts?
I just love how this type of comedy, it spans generations, because my father, who is a classic comedy, Three Stooges kind of guy, loves it, finds it funny. He introduced it to me, which like I said early on, funniest movie hands down that I've ever seen. And I hope, in hearing some of the younger guests that you guys have had in the past, love it. Okay, so that's another generation. I hope I'll be able to bring it to my kids who will find it as funny as I have.
Well, that has been something fun for me, having girls in college, and they were realizing we were going to do this project, and a couple of them had not ever seen it before, and to sat down and introduced it to them has been kind of a cool father-daughter moment to pass it on. So, yes, yet another generation going down that seems to gravitate toward the humor, that it does work.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
It does. And it is kind of timeless humor. And we mentioned this early on that for the time frame that it was, you don't have a bunch of Richard Nixon jokes or other things that culturally places it in a time frame. So it really is just a timeless movie.
All right. Well, let's close this one out. Like I said, we got the crate over here. We need to package it up, send it over to the Podcast Hall of Fame. But we do have another one we're working on for tomorrow. So you're going to have to come back because I think we figured out that the word he's going to be yelling is the word now, which is where we start our broadcast tomorrow, or our podcast tomorrow. And we will end with Dr. Frankenstein. Convince him that he is loved.
See, I thought the word was Naugahyde. I'm missing these things all over the place here.
Naugahyde.
Nostradamus! Nottingham!
Nostalgia!
What are you talking about?
Anyway, so that's going to do it for us. Come back tomorrow. One more time, though, Doug, let's give you a plug. Where can people go to find your Movies by Minutes podcast?
All right. If you're on Facebook, stop by Mighty Mix. It's our closed group, much like their Wild Ride listeners group. Just put in the request and you'll get accepted right away. Twitter, we are Rocky Minute on Twitter, and duelinggenre.com is our host website where we release all of our episodes. There's a ton of stuff over there, so please come over and check it all out.
Excellent. And Walt, where can people learn a little bit more about this Wilder ride we're on?
It'd be great if everybody would jump on over to Facebook, go to facebook.com/The Wilder Ride. From there, you can link to our listeners group. You can find our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/The Wilder Ride, and all the other places where you can find crazy people like us.
Just so thankful for having the audience. And Doug, thanks again for being here. And we're just looking forward to coming back tomorrow on this, The Wilder Ride.
Hillbilly hat.
Nosferatu! Maybe that's what it was. The Shadow.
I'm going Naugahyde. Could be.
Nosferatu! Naugahyde.
Naugahyde.